So the purpose of this video is to review exponent rules. Some of you guys might have seen this in middle school with some of the basic exponent rules. Some of these might be new to you. So we're just going to review first these exponent rules here. And then I'm going to do some example problems. So right here you have whenever you're multiplying with exponents, remember they have to be the same base, like in this case, x and x. If this was x and a y, I couldn't do this. So make sure you always do it the same base. So when you're multiplying, you add your exponents. When you divide, you subtract your exponents. When you have parentheses like this and you have an exponent on the outside, you multiply those exponents. And this just shows you another way. If you have two bases, you distribute to both of their exponents. Same thing if you have division inside parentheses, distribute to both. Now, when you have negative exponents, what happens is you have to flip your base and the exponent upside down, and that usually means it goes to the denominator. Now, if it's already in the denominator and it's negative, you do flip it to the top. And then anything to the 0 power is always equal to 1 no matter what, because when you divide by something, and like I say, if I divide 2 divided by 2, what do you get? 1. That's the same thing as taking the exponents and subtracting and getting 0, which means it ends up being 1. So let's do a couple of examples. Okay. So right here, I have 3x squared y, and then 10 x to the 5th, y to the 3rd. So I like to go ahead and label what things can be multiplied or combined. I know 3 times 10 goes together because they're coefficients, and that gives me 30. Now I'm going to do my x's because they are the same. So I'm going to do x squared times, because they know if they're beside each other, that is multiplication, times x to the 5th. Now remember, when we looked at the beginning slide, when we're multiplying, we add our exponents. So that is the same thing as 2 plus 5, which is x to the 7. Now I do the exact same thing with y. So I'm going to do y. Now, if there's no exponent there, we always assume it's a 1, times y to the 3rd. Same thing, I'm multiplying, so I'm going to add my exponents. So 1 plus 3 is 4. Now I need to put all of it together and make my final answer. So I have 30. I'm trying to get the red. 30, and then I have x to the 7, and then y to the 4. And so there is my final answer right there. So that is essentially the product rule. Okay, so now let's do one with the we call the power rule, and this is where you have the exponent on the outside raising everything on the inside. So remember from the first page, that means we multiply their exponents. Now it's kind of like distributing. I do distribute to everything. Now this is not 2 times 3, guys. This is 2 to the first times 3, or 2 times 2 times 2. That's the same thing, okay? So 1 times 3 is 3, and that's the same thing I have right here. So 2 to the 3rd, again, not 2 times 3, is 2 times 2, which is 4, 4 times 2, which is 8. So 2 to the 3rd is 8, not 6. Now I do the same thing with the x. Now the x has an exponent of 4, and I'm going to multiply it by the 3. 4 times 3 is 12. And now I can write my final answer. So I have 8 for my coefficient, and my x is x to the 12. There we go. So that is power rule. Now we have the quotient rule. Quotient means to divide, and when we divide, we always subtract the exponents. It's the exact opposite of multiplying, where we add exponents. So I'm going to do each one separate. So 6 and 8 are coefficients. You do not subtract them. They're not exponents. They're coefficients. So with those, you do like a regular fraction. You simplify the fraction. 6 over 8, I can't simplify to a whole number, so I just simplify the base and bottom, the top and bottom. So 6 can be divided by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So now my coefficients is 3/4. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the exponents, but remember when we do divide, we got to subtract the exponents. So I'm going to do the x's first. So I have 5 on the top, and then x on the bottom, so that means it's a 1. And what that means is I'm going to subtract, so I'm going to do 5 minus 1, which is 4. So my x is going to be 4. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the y. So I have y squared over y to the third. Now I'm going to subtract because we are dividing. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. Now remember, when you have a negative exponent, that means it's going to be flipped to the opposite part of the fraction that it was at. So since I was on top, it has to go where now? The bottom. So I'm going to flip, I'm going to write myself a note, flip bottom. Now I'm going to write my final answer. So I'll have 3/4. Remember, we simplified the fractions, 6 and 8. X to the fourth, so I'm going to extend my number line, my bar, x to the fourth. And then since y to the negative 1, it's a negative, I have to put it on the bottom. So that is y, and you can put the 1, but you don't have to. It's always understood to be 1. So that is the quotient rule. One last rule is the 0 rule. So remember, I am going to first, I'm going to practice distributing, even though I already know what the answer is going to be. But I'm going to practice distributing. So this is 4 to the first times 0. What is 1 times 0? 0. And then x to the first times 0. What's 1 times 0? 0. Now, anything to the 0 power equals what? 1 and 1. So what's my final answer? 1 times 1, which is 1. So those are all of your rules. Please make sure you look over this as many times as you want. Go back to previous problems in this PowerPoint and make sure you use this as reference when you do your assignments.